Good afternoon. It's Tim Ashe, the president of the Vermont Senate. I'm here on Thursday to provide today's update on Vermont's response to the COVID-19 virus. There are a lot of things going on throughout the state and in state government. Some of the things are the big picture items. Some of them fall into the smaller category. But I think those of us who have been in state government, even us, even those of us who live and breathe this stuff, have come to realize just how much in every ways that we hadn't really conceived of, how many ways state government plays a role in people's lives. And I hope that when we get to the other side of this, people will have a different appreciation for the men and women who show up every day to help make our lives as great as they are here in Vermont. I'm going to provide a number of shorter updates today. I expect tomorrow I'll have a more lengthy one for a couple reasons. Tomorrow we will know what the Department of Taxes has decided to move forward with to help support businesses and households who are going to have reduced income but still seeing tax bills. So tomorrow afternoon I'll be talking about what guidance the tax department is putting out in order to relieve people's tax pressure. I'll also provide a little bit more background tomorrow on what the federal legislation does. Just yesterday, the Senate passed, and I believe the governor is signing either yesterday or today, the first major response to the COVID-19 virus. The particular elements are still, we're trying to understand them, but they include unemployment insurance, benefit changes to make more people eligible, a paid leave program for certain eligible workers throughout the country, which would apply also in Vermont. It includes changes to the Medicaid program to send a whole bunch of money to the state of Vermont and all the other states to support them dealing with utilization of health services, which is going to go up. Also to the newly expanded enrollment, which is likely to happen as people lose their jobs and still need to get health services. So tomorrow I'll be primarily focusing on the tax changes and on the federal legislation. One thing I wanted to put out a fact just at the beginning, and it really gets to the heart of how we feel right now, like we're in a bit of there's two realities side by side. On the one hand, our collective society response, not just in Vermont but all over the country, indicates a massive crisis on our hands. But when we look outside, things seem to be going on almost like as normal. You know, the world around us doesn't look that different. And I think the reason why it's so important people in Vermont really respect the guidance we're getting from health professionals and do everything we can to keep people safe and do all the social distancing and all the other strategies is in a state with about 630,000 people, 150,000 are over the age of 60. So obviously, COVID-19, the older the individual, the more susceptible they are, especially if they have chronic illnesses. So 150,000, a little bit under a quarter of the state's population, are over the age of 60, and I think that really highlights the reason all of us, no matter what our ages are, have to pitch in to address this. Also tomorrow, I'll be giving a more comprehensive view of what's going on with the overall health department response. What I do know is that we are now up to 22 positive tests. Assuming we are like every other location on Earth that's had this problem, that number is going to jump up. But right now it's 22 tests. What I want to make sure we do tomorrow is go through a little bit of what's the broader health department take on where things stand from a public health point of view. I encourage anyone who has some concerns about childcare delivery in these initial days after the closure of schools to contact me either through Facebook or online, and I can email you the guidance that has been issued for both childcare and for schools. Even since the moment of the school closure and the ordering of all childcare facilities to close, except those serving essential personnel, we're learning a lot as we go from what the administration hoped to achieve and then what reality is forcing them to do to adjust. So I do encourage people, I won't have all the answers, but can provide you the specific guidance which speaks to who is eligible to get their child care provided and paid for, and what's expected of everyone else. Many teachers and school staff had wondered initially if they were being required to do duties that were outside of their normal area of expertise. Increasingly, we've come to understand that the child care services that might be delivered in school facilities are likely to be provided for by people who already do pre-K programs or outside child care providers, so that we're not putting people at risk who otherwise would not have to do that as part of their job requirements. There was one executive order today. I shouldn't say this in a lighthearted way, but I don't know that I would have anticipated that I would have seen an executive order like this while I was in the Senate. Today, Governor Scott issued an executive order which will allow restaurants and bars to deliver beer, wine, and mixed drinks directly to people's homes. On the surface, people might wonder why this is something that would rise to the top and be an executive order. I think there's really two issues. One is, since we are encouraging restaurants to deliver meals to people to help support them through these tough times, we know how critical it is for them to get every penny they can. So I guess it's part to help support those businesses stay afloat at this moment. But bars and restaurants also pay cash for all of the alcohol that they purchase through the Department of Liquor Control, and I think this was a way of helping them address the real cash flow problem as they've brought on all this inventory and now they're sitting on it. So I'll leave this for you to judge whether this is a good thing or a bad thing. I strongly hope that it will result in fewer people feeling the need to be driving after having alcohol, so they'll be at home when they receive it. But time will tell. But if people have thoughts about that and how it's going to work, certainly please let me know, and I can forward it to the governor's team and make sure that that works out. One other area, I've received feedback from a number of people throughout the state about whether local hospitals, how they are going to deal with the challenges they face right now. So, put simply, they are being asked to cancel, and most of them have, all elective surgeries and procedures to free up hospital space for people who will come in with the virus. So, the problem there is that they're not billing for the services the way they normally would. So the flow of money to support the hospital and support the staff and keep the lights on won't be at the same level. The Green Mountain Care Board, members of the legislature reached out to them and said that we cannot have hospitals having to close the doors as a result of doing the right thing to keep the most people safe. So the Green Mountain Care Board, who is the state entity that regulates hospitals, has given them much more flexibility in the short term, and we're going to be working with the governor's team to delay any payments the hospitals make to the state so that they can keep the money on hand and ride through this very difficult time. Another really interesting problem that needs to be solved is how we address vulnerable populations like the homeless. Obviously, many of our homeless shelters throughout the state have people in relatively close quarters, closer than normal in general, and so there's that problem of people being difficult to socially distance. But then there's the issue of what happens if someone is showing symptoms. And so just today, Harbor Place, which is run by Champlain Housing Trust, has agreed to be a place that would take people who are ill and use the facility for that purpose. There is also the Agency of Human Services working with nonprofit housing organizations and homeless service providers throughout the state to have a number of sites where people who have nowhere else to go but who have come in contact with people who are infected or become infected themselves can go and have a safe place to be isolated while receiving treatment and services. So there's my former boss, Amy Wright, used to say that in the housing world there's a conspiracy of goodwill. in this regard, there's a real conspiracy to meet the needs of our most vulnerable population. A couple other updates I'd like to give. Some of us have been hearing from providers of health services like physical therapy, mental health, and others who wish to be able to, who, in order to meet the needs of their clients or patients, need to be able to do it through teleconferencing. So we are now pushing the insurers in Vermont and our state's Medicaid program to allow as many appropriate procedures as possible to be done through telemedicine. So this is going a little slower than we hoped, and we might need to pass legislation next week to push that over the edge. But we obviously need people getting the services that they need. And if it's got to be by this alternative mechanism for the time being, well, that's, from my point of view, that's just the way it's got to be. So for all of you who have been experiencing some challenges with your insurers, getting them to reimburse you for whether it's physical therapy or other services, we are on it, and we are going to try to get to the other side of it so that you can stay afloat and meet the needs of the people you serve. I want to give a couple suggestions for people who might want to stay on top of what's going on as the state does work on its response. As I've mentioned in previous updates, the Senate committees that have been meeting have been doing so in a way that members of the public can call in and listen. And I won't lie, you might not be wildly interested in the topics at times, but the following committees will be having sessions by phone tomorrow where any member of the public can call in. Our Economic Development Committee is going to be focusing tomorrow on unemployment insurance and the federal paid leave bill. So if you are a small business owner or someone who is particularly interested in how people who have lost their jobs will be affected, I really encourage you to listen in on that discussion. Our Government Operations Committee tomorrow afternoon will be looking at the issue of military call-ups. As you may know, there was the National Guard has been activated by the governor's executive order. The Government Operations Committee will be trying to understand under what circumstances people are called away from their normal work in order to do National Guard service. If someone works in an emergency room, for instance, we may not want to pull them from that critical work for otherwise important work. So that prioritization of who gets called up is going to be one of the discussions. Also, how our emergency medical services, our ambulance crews, are dealing right now, especially when some of the people might have to be in self-isolation as a result of exposure and things like that. I have seen we have a joint rules committee meeting every day. This is where we're getting a high-level briefing on some of the most important big picture policies that we need to get right. On some days we've had more than 350 people listening in from all around the state. We have had to expand the teleconferencing system to accommodate even more listeners because we were crashing it basically, so people were getting frozen out. So we will continue to expand the capacity of that system in order to allow more people to be listening in. So if you encounter issues with that, as I see some people are commenting, just let me know and we will make sure we get you around that. Health and Welfare, which is one of the Senate committees, also going to be meeting tomorrow. They're going to be finalizing the Senate recommendation on actions that must be taken immediately to help healthcare providers meet the needs of people in this crisis. That will include issues around licensing, which people can do what tasks in a healthcare setting on an emergency basis, how telemedicine ought to be addressed if it's not already being done by the insurers, and we know that they're being somewhat slow to be responsive in light of the crisis we face. Also, some issues around hospitals being able to be flexible in the short term to add not permanent hospital beds, which normally would have to be approved by the state, but short-term facilities, so that if we get a surge like other jurisdictions have seen, we have the ability to be very responsive very quickly. So I almost touched my face, and I know that we're all supposed to stop doing that. So thank you to the commenter who told me not to do that. All of those committee meetings can be joined in by phone. If you go to the legislature's website, you will see a link to committees. When you do that, you just scroll over to the Senate committees and drop down to any of the ones I mentioned: economic development, government operations, health and welfare. It will have all the call-in information right there. You don't need to announce yourself. You'll be muted. You'll just be able to listen in. So I really encourage you to do so. I think I will close with one more. We are receiving, as I've said before, tremendous number of questions almost on an industry basis. And if there is any group that you think would benefit by having a conference call with me or with a member of the Senate who's one of the key people trying to address some of these issues, please email me offline and we can set something up, because I found one of the most challenging things for all of us right now is everyone trying to be on the same page with information. There's so much stuff flying around. It is not all accurate, and sometimes it's helpful for people to have a large group hear it from the horse's mouth one time, rather than everyone trying to piece together the truth for themselves. I also want to say that people who are in the hospitality industry, many of them have suffered the biggest shock to the system, maybe in Vermont history, with the sudden closure order. We have received a request that was put together by 100 or more restaurants at this point, and they have made a series of requests to help get them through these hard times. I just want to assure anybody who was participating in that, we've received it. The appropriate people are going to review it and see what we can do. Some of it is out of the legislature's hands for now. It's in the governor's hands, but we will work with them to see what we can do to support you guys and get you through it. I'm going to, I think, conclude here and just remind you tomorrow we'll focus on the tax issues, because there will be new guidance from the federal government. Focus a little bit on a broader update on healthcare from the public health from the health department, and the federal legislation. And I think it is always worth repeating the refrain that we should all be grateful about the state we live in, the people who are on the front lines addressing all the crisis in all the different ways that people are, is truly remarkable. It's been really amazing. I've been in the Senate. This is my 12th year. And I've watched people work together generally very well over the 12 years in government, people in different political parties. I've never seen everybody pull together so quickly, set aside all the pettiness and egos that tend to come with elected officials in general, and just put the best interest of the state first and foremost. I mean, it is really an impressive thing to be part of and see the entire mindset shift from the small to just focusing on public safety. And so without a single exception, every member of the legislature and every member of the governor's team have been just spot on in terms of what the emphasis should be. I would be remiss in not saying that working with the Speaker on this, Speaker Johnson, has been terrific. The ability for us to be on the same page, communicating well with the governor, has just been really made the progress we've made already possible, and so I owe a debt of gratitude to her. Frankly, the whole state will in the end. By the end of today, we will be deciding, the Speaker and I, whether the legislature will come back in on Tuesday to take action on some what we would call emergency measures, things that require statute change and are critical right now. So by tomorrow, you'll either hear from me or hear before that the Senate and House will be coming back for very quick action. These will not be long debates on the floor. This will be for the critical stuff that has to happen immediately to help keep people safe. That'll be the next update we have. So thanks for tuning in. Keep the questions coming, either by email or on Facebook or on other forums. We're doing our best every time we get one of the questions to forward it to the right people to see if we can get action and move people along. So keep them coming and keep taking safe actions for yourselves. Thanks.